it's likely to fail when you actually deploy it for your end users, right? And hence, if you kind of think about it that way, you got to think about different editorial models as well, right? And the classic difference between what I refer to as content-driven authoring or page-driven authoring, right? Visually illustrated below here, but best explained by the use case of, you know, a online news publisher versus a digital marketing campaign producer. So if you think about news publishers, right, for those of you who work for a news and media client, or for those of you who've done a CMS implementation for a news and media client, you would know that, you know, for them, the real key factor is a time to market. If you've got breaking news, if a journalist walks in with breaking news, you want to get that out quickly. It needs to be fast. It needs to be quick. You don't want to waste time in you know, things like, you know, designing the page, laying out the page. You want all of that to be pre-defined, pre-configured. You just want to type in your news story and go, and it needs to be there, right? So your authoring process is very content-driven in this case, right? You're focusing on creating your content, your assets, and publishing it out. So it's kind of following the first view of it that you see here, right? On the other hand, if you're a marketing campaign producer, if your goal in life is to promote your brand or several products under your brand and create a whole bunch of interactive campaigns to promote that brand, you're probably very worried about experiences, and you're probably very worried about how you design rich experiences for your customers. And hence, while you are worried about the content, you're equally worried about the composition of that content. You're equally worried about the design, the experience, the layout, and you want to have a lot of control. More importantly, you want to have the flexibility in exercising what I refer to as creative freedom, which is my ability to design my own campaign without getting IT and developers to come in and do development every time I need to design a new layout or every time I need to design a new page. And hence, what you're really asking for is a page-driven authoring model, right, and the ability to kind of work more with this style. So there is a subtle difference, but the difference is quite important when you factor into your package selection, right, which is certain packages are inherently more content-centric in the way they work, right? They may claim to support the other model as well, but they are inherently more content-centric. On the other hand, certain packages are inherently more page-centric. So the big question is, what do your editors need, right? What are they likely to work with? What are they likely to be more successful with, right? We've seen and we've done implementations where models recommended one way and actually needed the other way tend to fail, right? Because essentially your customer wants to work with the system in a certain way, whereas you're forcing them to work with the system in a different way, and that could lead to issues like more user training, poor system usability, and so on and so forth, right? And you obviously want to avoid that. All right, and the next one, which we've hopped on a few times now, but is the importance of business scenarios, right? And how do you do that? And so the idea is to do away with what I used to call the classic 500 line item Excel sheet, right? I remember 10 years back on this package selection project I was handed over a 500 line item Excel sheet and say, please fill in what these 5 products do, against 500 criteria, and obviously that was a nightmare to try and fill in 2,500 cells. But beyond that, you question yourself that even at the end of that journey, what value did you add to the customer? You probably had a huge Excel sheet, but in terms of helping making the decision, was that really valuable? And that is a little questionable, right? Both in terms of the effort spent and the time spent, but also the value of that deliverable. And at the same time, it's also not useful to have, features which are really stated as keywords. The same point about I need multi-site, I need workflows type of stuff. That doesn't help either, because then I don't really know what you want and what you're after. And hence, it's quite important to use this idea of a real-life usage model to clarify your requirements, and then really use that real-life usage model to drive everything from your vendor discussion to your vendor RFP to your product demonstration to your proof of concept and so on and so forth, right? So for example, if you're seeing the graphic here, one way of doing this is you're saying, I need multilingual, which is, okay, I understand that. Or you could say what I really need is the ability to manage a content hierarchy across different regions and across different languages, where I have both localization and translation needs. Now that's quite specific, right? Now you went away from this idea of a keyword or a feature which was just multilingual to this idea of saying, here's my scenario. I need the ability to create global content in a language, let's say English. From there, I need the ability to regionalize that content in English for North America and Europe, which means even though it's English, for North America it's different, and for Europe it's different. And then within those major regions, I need to have it translated for different languages, right? So you now start to see the real use case for multilingual needs, which is different from if I just told you all I need is multilingual, right? All right, and then the same concept applies to your vendor demonstrations as well, which is often you will run into the temptation of inviting a vendor who will have their out-of-the-box demonstration site, which may be good to demonstrate the product features, and fair enough, in some cases it may be a compelling demo as well. But that's where you kind of need to draw the line between what is sales talk versus what is the implementation of your business scenario and your business process, right? So it's not about a canned demo. It's not about here is what the product does, and it's not about here is a demo site that shows it in action. It's more about saying, well, here is what we need of the product, and can you demonstrate that for us, right? It could be a scenario around how do you drive greater engagement. It could be a scenario around how do you drive greater personalization, and so on and so forth. But in my opinion, it's fairly important to guide your shortlisted vendors and to encourage them to bring demonstrations that are much more relevant to what the customer really wants, because not only does that help the business users on the customer side gain greater confidence in what they're seeing, but they're able to correlate to what they're seeing out there in terms of this is really what I want, right? Pretty much in terms of my business needs. And then obviously internally you want to make sure that you've got the stakeholders across business and IT and marketing participating in these demos. That's very important so that you can get the feedback. This is also a good opportunity to push what I refer to as the single suite vendors to demonstrate their full business process, right? So for example, if you're inviting one of those large enterprise players who claim to have everything in one solution from WCM to DAM to search to social collaboration, one of the things you want to test as part of this demonstration is, do you have those pieces in silos, or do you have the entire solution integrated and stitched together, right? Because if you think about it, there's a lot of touch points between how these systems talk to each other. And the last thing you want to run into is that you're actually buying 6 independent products from the same company and then taking on the headache of how you want to integrate them versus you're buying a pre-integrated solution. So this is also an opportunity to kind of guide your shortlisted vendors to say, let's demonstrate the end-to-end business process. And here's an example for a retail firm or a CPG firm or a digital marketing firm as to the type of business process they would want to see in a complete solution, right? All the way from where you collaborate on a campaign and a campaign concept to where you give birth to that campaign concept and create all the assets for that campaign, whether they're images or videos, to where you define the content for that campaign, and finally make that campaign engaging by bringing in rich media capabilities and social engagement capabilities, right? So there's a whole life cycle to delivering a campaign here, which is cutting across many different systems and many different capabilities. And so if you are in a vendor demonstration, and if that's really what your business need is, and that's really why your business is investing in a WCXM solution, you want to push the vendor to say, can you demonstrate their end-to-end capability of being able to define a campaign from scratch and take it live with all of these capabilities built in. All right, and then the last one is really the need to get hands-on with the package, right? I think many of you already do this, but I think it's important to realize that there is a difference between reading an evaluation sheet, between seeing a vendor demo versus getting hands-on with it, right? And the flavor of how you get hands-on with it may differ. Some of you may prefer to do sandbox deployments, so you're doing trials of the package using evaluation licenses or equivalent. Some of you may be doing prototyping, some of you may be doing proof of concepts. Whichever way, the point is that you need to get exposed enough to how the package works so that all your stakeholders across IT, across business and editors have the chance to see it in action and have the chance to kind of make a more informed decision, one way or the other. This is also the opportunity to mitigate risk. In particular, if you've got specific integration points or specific areas of concern. It could be, for example, a single sign-on integration, a security integration, an analytics integration, and maybe you've already got some software in your enterprise that you need to figure out how to integrate with. This is a good opportunity to use a sandbox to test that out and mitigate the risk by saying, will this work? Will the two work together or not, right? All right, so summing it up, we're pretty much coming to the end of this. If you think about the overall journey for an effective WCXM package selection, it's really a couple of phases, right?